I'd love to see an updated version of that checklist. Some of it's going to be the same because the federal guidelines haven't changed, but the way the nuances are as they've gone from one set of standards to the next, will anticipate would adjust that a little bit. And so I'm hoping that we receive a document like that. They also have a checklist for a comprehensive report. They've got a structure they want you to follow. Chapter 1 is this, and this, and chapter 2 is X, Y, Z, and so forth, where they really line out for you how you're supposed to develop your comprehensive report that you submit. So again, looking for that type of documentation that would help us and give us some of the specifics in how they'd like us to prepare the materials for our visit. Right now, we are doing some work within the college, primarily with cabinet members, but also with our assessment committee, looking at the new standards and the documentation we need to show compliance with them. And because we haven't done this training next week, we're not asking folks to start writing parts of the report because we want to see what comes out of that training. But what we're asking folks to do right now is identify those areas where looking at standards that relate to their particular area of the college, and identify those areas where we may need to do a bit of work to make sure we're in compliance. And so an example of something that we have identified is there's a list of things that we have to have in our catalog. And there are some things that are not in there. And they're not things where in 5 minutes you can produce them. And so we've been working with faculty on saying, here are the elements that we need and the time frame to get that information together so we can put it in the catalog. There's also some things some updates we want to make with our assessments and financial aid procedure updates. So we're trying to identify those things where it's going to take a bit of time to create the documentation or the policies, procedures, what have you, to be prepared for the visit. We don't want to identify those things in June when everything has to be done in August. So we're trying to identify those things early so we have the rest of the year to prepare whatever documentation we need to support, to go into the report or support. I think I'd also shared with you that I'm doing a visit to a college this spring. I have had communication with that college and found out that they will be addressing the new standards. And to me, that's great because then I'll have one visit under my belt of having addressed the new standards. The commission only does visits in the spring and in the fall. And so the visit this spring will be the first opportunity that any institution will have to address the new standards. So having that experience will certainly be beneficial.
It's another community college?
Yes. Yes. So the way that the commission does these evaluations is evaluators visit like schools. So I would never visit a university, nor would we have evaluators from a university that would come and visit us. So they try to get peer institutions. And up to this point, they always have evaluators from another state. You never visit an institution within the same state. So as far as our preparations, say some of the positive things we have going for us. Going to this training, this visit in the spring, we'll address the new standards, will certainly be helpful. We're being proactive and trying to identify those things that it takes some time to work on. And I think all of those things will help us. There's also a worst case scenario I want to share. Hopefully this doesn't happen, but it's in the realm of possibility. So there are, within the commission, there are 4 called senior vice presidents, service liaisons for schools, and will attend visits. Okay, there's the one I mentioned who just left. there's the most senior one who retires next month. So 2 of the 4 are gone by the end of this year, and so they'll have two new individuals there. And of the 2 that are remaining, one's been there for quite some time, the other one is starting. So a worst case scenario for us is you have new standards, a visiting committee that's never done an evaluation of the new standards, and a new staff member from the commission that's guiding the team. So again, that could open up a variety of interesting conversations when we visit. Obviously, we hope that doesn't happen, but we want to go into it with our eyes wide open. So, any questions about accreditation stuff?
Just how are those senior positions filled? By application, by appointment?
By application. I know they have at least one of them posted. They're doing a competitive search, and I don't know if they're posted right now or not, but they'll go through that process. Typically, just knowing the folks that I know of that are there, they tend to come from schools, so they've been practitioners at an institution, and so they bring that practical experience with them. Okay. So a couple other topics. We hosted a meeting with superintendents from our service district last week. There were 9 who attended, and that included Michelle Price from the ESD out of Wenatchee. We actually have, within our service district, we have school districts in 4 different ESDs, but the majority of them are in ESD out of Wenatchee. It was, I think it was a very successful visit. We shared with them some college-specific information. You have a copy of that in your consent agenda, but we also shared with them specific data on students from their school district that come to Big Bend. And shout out to Valerie for the great work she did in pulling that together. They found that particularly informative to see information about students, graduates from their schools who had come here. We had a tour of our aviation maintenance program. Wanted to highlight that because of the partnership we have with mostly school district and CV Tech and new aviation maintenance program that they're starting there, and that's an opportunity for students from any of these districts to come to CV Tech and participate. We took them through part of the WEC building and also shared with them some of the work we're doing with our contextualized math and Florida math. And there's a lot of utility there for them, and it's open source curriculum, so it's something that if they want to, some of them express an interest in using some of that curriculum with some of their students.
So Bryce, I'm
Yes.
brief on one of the data points in there that you included. Wanted to make sure I understood it. So the BBCC student data, you've got the year-by-year breakouts. So am I understanding this right? So a running start student, their average grade point average is 2.94. And if it's a student that's coming to Big Bend after graduating high school, their average GPA is 2.63. Is that the data? Am I understanding it right?
Yeah,
Okay.
our running start students tend to perform.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting.
They do very well.
Yeah, and it's year over year. I mean, it's not just 1 year that's a freak of nature.
And it's not unexpected because running start students, for the most part, are those students who go from high school to university. And so they are the more academically prepared and higher performing.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
I was a bit surprised, frankly, by how, as we had conversations with the superintendents about ways that we can work with them, I was surprised at how many different topics they brought up, of ways that we could collaborate with them. It was, the number and the breadth of topics was quite exciting. And so that found it from our perspective, a very positive visit, and we certainly have a list of things to follow up with individual school districts on. Yeah.
Any chance there was a super from Adams County?
You have two.
Fellow and.
And then the last thing on that, the next thing we have planned in relation to working with our schools is on that December 5th, we have a summit plan that we are inviting high school guidance counselors and principals to. Looking at how we can better work with them, and we have a host of things we can talk about relative to transitioning students to college, and whether it be as dual enrollment students or after they graduate. So we're very excited about strengthening those ties with our local schools. This week we've had quite a few visitors on campus. We had our Achieving Dream coach here yesterday and today. And we also had our consultant with Starfish here yesterday and today. And we had a video team here shooting videos for an online new student orientation. And so quite a bit of activities happening. Those that met with our Starfish consultant, the feedback I received thus far is very helpful. They're in the process of getting that software set up and establishing processes for implementation, and the conversations with the consultant were very focused on the nuts and bolts of what we roll out when and how
Tell me a little more about Starfish. What is it? What does it do?
So Starfish is a software package that we purchased a subscription to using some of our grant funds. And what it allows us to do is it allows us to better keep track of our students. And so the piece that we're going to roll out initially is an early alert system. And so this software interfaces with our student management system. So student management records about XYZ student, their schedule, their demographics, also interfaces with Canvas, where it's a delivery platform for many of our courses. And so we can have a series of faculty member can go in and say they can click on a series of what are called flags to identify if the student isn't showing up to class, or maybe the student's great, doing great, you want to give a kudos to a student, or they're late with an assignment or have a missing test or whatever. So you can identify, click on one of the series of flags, and then that flag then goes, and this is the process part, goes to someone, and you have to designate that someone to follow up with that student, some type of intervention. And maybe it's a phone call, or also need for advising, or refer to tutoring, or any one of the number of actions. And so it creates that ability to keep track of a large number of students, refer them to services, and follow up. As we look at our advising, then you can have an advisor that has X number of students. They can keep track of all the advisees that were assigned to them, who they've advised with, and who they haven't. Students can set up the software interfaces with the calendar that the faculty or the staff have, so students can set appointments with an advisor. If you have a case manager that's trying to, or a coach, someone that has a group of students they're responsible for, then it's a way to help keep track of those students and communicate and follow up. So we see it as a very valuable tool, a lot of potential for helping us identify, helping us support certain student groups that we've identified that have particular needs.
How many other schools use this?
So in the market, there are three major competitors in this market, and I would say the schools in Washington State, nearly half of them have purchased a subscription to one of these three products. The vast majority are going with Starfish. I think there's around a dozen schools in the state that use Starfish. It's the most mature product. It's been around the longest, and it's probably the most comprehensive and mature as far as the system. So that's been very beneficial. Our Achieving the Dream coach was working with us on just looking at some strategic work that we're doing and giving us guidance on both the rollout of Starfish, but moving forward with any one of our strategic efforts related to advising student supports. A lot of discussion about knowing our processes and knowing the needs of specific students and designing our interventions around the needs of the specific needs of students. So because those meetings just concluded an hour ago, or 2 hours ago, we haven't had a chance to really debrief, but from the comments I've heard from folks, they were pretty positive about what they heard and what they did. So any other questions about any of that? There's two other things I want to mention to you. One is I had a meeting Tuesday with Central Washington University that Tom Dent put together in regards to aviation. So just want to give you a brief update on that. Tom has, Representative Dent has pulled together a group of individuals to provide some technical expertise, if you will, to these discussions. There was a vice president of operations from Horizon and another individual from Horizon, as well as a very successful private businessman who's not in the aviation industry, that we met with, had an interesting dialogue, a lot of question and answer, and frankly, most of it was directed towards Central about what's going on there and what are some of the challenges that they're facing, and then how do we move forward. Probably the feedback that we received the most of was it was important to have someone with a strong background in analytics and logistics that could look at the specifics of both of our programs, the resources we have available, and how we are or are not leveraging those resources to run an efficient, effective program. At the end of the meeting, the most significant next step, or the only real concrete next step we talked about was they discussed bringing the hosting some folks from both Central and Big Bend over to the headquarters of either Horizon or Alaska Air to see some of the operations and how they do some of their work. From my perspective, as we were having the conversation, I'm listening to where it's going and whatnot. My conclusion at the end was, I don't know where things are going to go with this whole thing with Central. Not a clue. But if in this process we're able to strengthen our connections with the aviation industry, specifically Horizon Alaska, that's a win for the college. If they're giving us feedback or insights on how we can improve what we're doing and making a strong connection, that's a win for the college. And if there is a stronger connection with Central and work through whatever misunderstandings are there, then that's a win for us as well. So I think there's benefits for the college in engaging the conversations and working with this regardless of whatever happens with the aviation programs.
Other than your time, is there any additional cost to us pursuing this merger?
At this point, there's travel to drive to Ellensburg and back, and my time at we're not in a position where we're committing to, okay, we're going to do XYZ thing and committing resources. Right now, it's very exploratory.
And you've got a volunteer trio of corporate experts sitting in the room, and a state representative who serves both schools, who's highly engaged and is definitely an advocate for producing more licensed pilots. So it's a pretty good collective in terms of enthusiasm from what I'm hearing. But it is a long walk, not a short one.
Just off my head, it would seem once you get into the logistical piece of it, though, that could cost some money, couldn't it, to do some kind of study?
It could, and
So we're
so
not there, I understand that, but
that's something we would need to look at if we wanted to get to that.
Bryce, I do understand that the other suggestion was field trip number 2 might be to go see a premier school, aviation school.
Yeah, there was talk about going to Prescott, Arizona. They talked about, Embry-Riddle has a campus in Daytona, but there's I don't know if it's Embry-Riddle or another school, but a smaller school is more comparable in size in Prescott. And so there was talk about potentially doing something there. That was not as concrete as the more concrete, let's find a date where we can go visit Alaska or Horizon, and then we might look at a visit to another school.
so does Alaska Horizon, they do actual pilot training, or what do they do?
So I know they do training with their pilots. I think my perception from the conversation was they wanted to see more, they wanted us to see how they deal with operations. So whether you're running an airline or a flight school, you have airplanes that are flying, you have maintenance, you've got to move staff around because you've got a pilot in the plane or not in the plane. And so it was more of the logistics of how they're managing their fleet and their personnel and their crew. That's where the conversation was. To clarify.
Nice.
The last thing that I wanted to mention was there was an email that Terry sent to the board, I think it was last week, about an incident that we had with a student. Recently, a couple things I'll touch on. Kim has some other things she'll share, so if it gets into something that Kim's going to talk about. So we had an incident on campus with a threat from a student, and we were able to respond and deal with that situation. And in the debrief, which is pretty critical, we certainly identified things where we did well, but we also identified a host of things that we need to improve. And we have a great deal of highly skilled, competent staff on campus, security, care team, counseling, student services, our case managers, and that were responding to this, given all of these folks did an outstanding job. But we certainly have areas that we need to improve upon. And we've talked about how we need to make sure we're more familiar with emergency response plans, how the leadership of the college at the cabinet level need to make sure that they understand their roles. We've had some turnover there, so make sure people understand their roles in responding to emergent situations. And also having some cross-department discussions. That was an area where we found some areas of weakness where it's important that staff in different departments know how to interact, and who to contact, and who not to contact, and how to interact with one another, respond to the situation. And doing some cross-training as well. So this is certainly an area that we have some to make some improvements. Again, I want to commend the folks that responded and handled it in a very professional manner, and also recognize that we have areas that we need to improve. don't know if there were other specific questions, and it was general, but I want to know.
Sure.
Specific questions.
So the safety and security report makes a reference to significant incidents, and there's the summary of those here. Has something changed on campus that's caused there to be a spike in things like graffiti?
So, yes, so this incident was with our Open Doors program. I think I believe it's not isolated to Open Doors. One of the things that we are experiencing is a younger student population. If you look at our average age to now, and you see the data, and I would give the superintendents, it's right around 21. Whereas several years ago, I don't know what it was, but it was higher in the 20s. We had older students, and our student body is getting younger, and much of that has to do with new enrollment students. This year, we anticipate that we will be serving 800 high school age students to the college, and the vast majority of them will be on campus. And so we need to be better prepared to serve a younger, less mature population. With our Open Doors, this is a youth re-engagement program. It's something that we have had for a few years, but the numbers have increased dramatically this year. And so while we've had a younger population and an at-risk population on campus, we haven't seen the volume that we're seeing now. And so that's a piece of it, yet a significant piece of it. I guess the other thing that I would say is as we look at how we are trying to meet the needs of our community, we have conversations with the superintendents about how to engage those high school graduates that don't attend college. Each of these schools have 40 some odd to 60 some odd % of the graduates that are not pursuing those. And as we continue to try to engage individuals that have not pursued area before, and bring with them the life experience and the baggage that comes with that, we will see more stress, more trauma, more issues that we need to deal with. And this is not something that is isolated. This is something that we're seeing across the state and across the nation. There's increased discussions about counseling services and support services in college campuses.
Any other questions? In partial response to your question, I think the spike that you reference is natural given the rapid growth in the number of students that are at more risk, perhaps, and then we've recently hired people, caseworkers with the background and the skills to be working with this population and trying to kind of catch up on that growth. And so we're hoping that you're going to see some plateauing.
So you feel staffing is coming up to the level necessary to manage this?
Yes, so two points I'd like to make relative to that. One is, so within the Open Doors program, there's funding that comes with those students. And there's also a state mandated student to case manager ratio. And so as the numbers increase, we have to hire additional case managers with the revenue that's coming from those students to work with them. And in reference to that rapid growth that Terry indicated, that goes back to that comment I made about the departments reviewing and looking at how those departments are interacting and working with one another. So you're having new folks come on board, very talented, very professional, but not as up to speed as we'd like them to be on what systems the college has in place or policy and procedures we have in place. And so really looking at how one department interacts with others to respond to those situations.
And I have a question for the trustees, with regard to these kinds of incidents. Are we giving you enough information? Are you satisfied with the way we're communicating, keeping you updated on these? Or is there something more that we need to do?
I think the reporting is adequate. It's just kind of the nature of trends has been interesting. And so as we get that information and just having that evaluation and feedback about what resources the college has and how we're addressing them.
And I know not to ask this exactly, but we are a Hispanic serving institution. Are there any funds available? Not that there's a direct correlation between Hispanic and the problem we're experiencing. Are there any resources available through that grant that we are using or could be using?
So so the short answer is not currently. So we have grant funds because of our HSI status to do XYZ activities. And so we are, we're restricted to whatever activities were written into the grant back when it was written. Some of those, whether it's 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago. Okay? And so the pause, the hesitation you saw me is each one of them has an advising component. And so where if there's an intersection between, okay, we need to strengthen some advising, that's an allowable expense for that particular grant project, then that's an area where we could strengthen something, right? But moving forward, if we apply for a new grant and say, here's whatever the need is, we can write that in as a grant, as a project grant.
When will the new grant?
So they run a cycle every year. And so we applied for one last spring and came close, but we're not successful in landing that grant. Though we anticipate another cycle this year. Like I said, they usually run the competition every year. There's some years when they don't, but they usually do. So we're watching to see if they're going to run. We'll probably ever run another competition. If they do, we intend to.
One question for you. One of the things in the packet under the context of safety and security, I noticed that there's several plans that the director of campus safety and security submitted, and he's waiting approval of those policies and plans.
That's the next question.
And do you have a time frame for when those will be approved and then implemented?
If I need to get through peer review and the capital piece, probably not till January. We've done some, we did some work half a year ago on some of those. There's a lot of different plans, and they come from, the bulk of them come from borrowing from other institutions, and so we have to weed through what is our institutional process versus the other institutional process. It's tough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Other questions?
Thank you, Mike.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for all you do. You have a full load.
There's plenty to.
Vice President of Human Resources and Labor from Georgia. Next.
Yes. Okay. So I do have some updates for you outside of what I shared in my report. And I apologize. I handwrote them out, so it feels really long, but hopefully it won't take that long. So the first thing that I wanted to share with you is that the Washington Public Employee Association has filed a petition to represent custodial services, employees in custodial service and in buildings and grounds. So we've been working through a process with PERC PERC determined that there was a sufficient showing of interest, so at least 50% of the employees in those two departments signed cards, and so through a card check process, PERC certified a new bargaining unit here on campus. So we now have two groups that are represented by WPEA. So we have Big Bend Technology, and now we have Custodial Services and Buildings and Grounds. They're a single unit. So two distinct units, but they both fall under the same collective bargaining agreement. And so Big Bend is a part of the coalition of community and technical colleges that negotiate with WPEA. So we are represented at that level by attorneys from the Labor and Personnel Division. So that's helpful. So right now, we just received that notification on Tuesday, the 12th, and we'll be working through the AG's office to sort out kind of what the transition is. The union may wish to meet with us and negotiate some items prior to implementation of that. So wanted to keep you updated on that. Let's see. So Bryce talked a little bit about an incident that occurred with regard to student threat. The other thing that's happened within the last month is we did have a timely notification that went out across campus. And so I wanted to share with you a little bit about that process and how those decisions come about. I will say that I am not the expert on the timely warning process, but I do have some connection with that because of my role as the college's Title IX coordinator. So in the capacity for Title IX, my responsibilities include receiving and investigating complaints that include or fall under sexual harassment, sexual misconduct, sexual assault. So Kyle Foreman, our Director of Campus Safety, Security, and Emergency Management, he really is our Clary person, and so we work together pretty closely as issues come up. So the Clary Act and Title IX are both federal laws, and they have a lovely dysfunctional relationship with each other. So Clary, the way that I remember it is Clary really is focused first on where and then what happened. So where did it happen and then what happened? And so when incidents occur within the campus footprint or our Clary kind of designated campus area, that means that rule is what we look at. And so where did it happen and then what was the incident? And then we determine based on the rules if there is a timely warning that needs to go out. Title IX is focused on who and then what. So students, and it doesn't matter where it occurred, so it could occur off campus outside of the boundaries, but if there are students involved and it meets the definition under our policy of a Title IX issue, then we have to investigate whether it occurred on campus or not. So we did receive a complaint of an incident that met the Clary requirements, and so we determined that a timely warning needed to go out. And Clary requires us to do those, to notify students and employees so that the campus community can take steps to keep themselves safe. Unfortunately, Clary does not define what a timely notification is. And I think there's probably a lot of case law and things that have come up that would indicate you would want to err on the side of more timely rather than less. And so we don't always have the option to run a full-blown investigation before we make that decision. So under Title IX, I have 60 days, about 60 days to complete an investigation, and depending on the nature of the complaint, sometimes I will run right up to that timeline. And so a notification that goes out after 60 days probably would not be considered timely. So we're trying to meet our obligations under both of those rules. And so we're balancing the rules of both of those laws as well as the interest of students. So we have an interest for faculty, staff, and students to be protected. We also have an interest in making sure that the students, the complainant, and the respondent in those situations have the support services they need to work through that process because it is challenging and daunting. So that might be more than what you wanted to know, but it would not be appropriate for me to share additional information at this time, other than to just let you know the investigation is ongoing.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, is that helpful? I would say if you have really specific questions about Clary, I'm sure Kyle would love to talk to you about that. So the last thing that I have is just to update you on the Campus Climate Action Plan. And I wanted to let you know that, so you've seen the narrative of the plan, and we've been working on converting that narrative into a work plan format. And so we completed that part of the process. The plan is out, and I'm getting feedback on that kind of draft schedule, in part because as we were putting it together, we made some assumptions about dates and assignments that may or may not be doable at this point in time. So I would expect that the next step after get all the feedback from the executive team would be to share that with cabinet and then distribute that out through the campus community. But I wanted to share with you a couple of things from the plan that we have accomplished already or that are ongoing. So we have elected to continue our relationship, our consulting relationship with Linda Salisbury. She's going to continue to work with the executive team members through June of 2020. As part of that process, we are meeting with, Bryce, Linda, Terry, and myself, we're meeting with different employees each month, asking them some very specific questions to gather feedback, and then sharing that information with Linda. I think she has some kind of CSI map on the wall of her office with strings and things like that. That's what she kind of shared to look at trends and different pieces. And I have found that to be helpful. And I think the others that we've all found that to be really helpful as well. So we are distributing talking points. So Matt at each cabinet and shared governance meeting is collecting specific talking points that are to be distributed throughout the campus. And within 24 hours of that meeting, that information is going out to the members of that committee to share within their departments. And then the minutes are always posted on the portal. And I think that's been very helpful. As a supervisor, it made it really easy for me to just share that information with my staff right as soon as I got them, and then answer any questions that they had. And at least the feedback I received was that it was a helpful piece. So we have completed, so the cabinet members have completed leader user guides. Do you all have access to the portal? I think maybe access to the portal? Yes. So if you go on the portal and you go to the cabinet webpage, you'll see a folder called Leader User Guides. And what this is, we got this idea from a colleague at another institution, Stephanie Delaney, and it is a really easy way to share about yourself and about your leadership style with people who either report to you or folks that don't know you very well. And so each person is written a little different, and you can probably guess people's personality styles by how they presented themselves in that. As they have been shared out, I think folks have found them interesting, and we have broached the subject with Shared Governance Council. So we have some supervisors now who are working on those leader user guides, but it really is important because it is a way to get information out to people without having them feel like they have to ask hard questions or just guess. Like, does that person like a phone call, or do they like email? Am I not supposed to talk to them before 9 a.m. or can I bust in at 7:30 in the morning? Different things like that, as well as what's your Myers-Briggs, what is your leadership style, depending on the different things that you've gone to. So that's I think we found that to be less painful than we thought and more beneficial than perhaps we anticipated. So that's a good thing. And you're welcome to read them. Let's see. We Thursday Thoughts have kicked off, so that's kind of our mini version of kind of a newsletter. So that's been happening every Thursday since September 26th. We also have leadership training that is scheduled in December. So each admin exempt and classified staff employee will attend 8 hours, either in 2 half-day segments or 1 full day of training with Michael Nash. Michael Nash Consulting is coming on campus to do that for us. And he's going to cover, or the sessions are going to cover morale, listening, emotional intelligence or emotional IQ, and behavior styles. So the feedback so far is, other than maybe the timing is not as, does not make everybody as happy because it's right up against Christmas. People are excited for the opportunity to participate. So we're filling up the sessions with all of our staff folks first, and because faculty are not on contract at that time, they're welcome to participate if they want to do that, because we will have lots of opportunities for that. And then I believe we're bringing Michael Nash back in the new year to do full-blown training with all of our supervisors as well. So we have a couple of work groups that started in September. So onboarding and orientation led by Tammy Dufionic. She's got 10 to 12 members, good cross-section of faculty and staff. And they are reviewing the new employee surveys, finalizing supervisor checklists for new employees, and then looking at our existing orientation structure and process to make some changes there. Leanne Parton is leading our leadership development group. Looks like they have about 5 people on that committee, and they're the group that are really working on the NASH training that's coming up, getting some pre and post training surveys put together and some other items. And then Valerie Parton and Fabiola Barbosa lead the workplace standards group, and their goal is to come up with a common set of workplace kind of standards and expectations that we can all utilize moving forward. And there's 8 employees on that. Again, a good cross-section of faculty and staff. So, and then I think on my next page, yep, we've done a number of monthly celebrations. So we're doing birthday and anniversary celebrations on a monthly basis. And who doesn't love food? So we're getting a wide variety of lovely dessert items, and maybe some maple bacon. That might be a good one. We'll have to see. We also have our upcoming kind of our standard events that we do, the holiday potluck, and then our celebration luncheon in the spring. We added an ice cream social and a scavenger hunt fall quarter, particularly to help our new faculty and staff that we're starting in September get to know each other and participate. And that was really well attended. And so we are making progress, and I think that we'll continue to make progress moving forward. We'll be providing you with updates from this point forward. Is there something specific you would like to know?
Just that John and I, from the search committee, have met with you numerous times, and we had that conversation about faculty turnover as a sidebar. And so maybe you could share the sort of the fast facts of the number of faculty that have moved on, and also the number of tenured that have moved on.
So we have 55 full-time faculty. So those are our full-time tenured faculty positions. And since 2012, when I arrived, we have turned over more than half of those positions. The primary reason for full-time faculty turnover has been retirement. So you've seen a number of folks retire. Within the last couple of years, we've seen an increase in tenured faculty who are looking for other opportunities. So we've had a higher turnover rate amongst our admin exempt folks seeking other positions as opposed to retirement. And this is the first time that we've started to see that in our tenured faculty, which has felt odd to me because, you know, tenure is, you're there for as long as you want to be there. And so we do have some folks who through, you know, one-on-one meetings or exit interviews have expressed frustration. I don't have the numbers to give you off the top of my head. I apologize for that. But there's been frustration, as you would recognize in the climate report, with decision-making and communication and different things. So it's not a surprise. Those things have an impact across all of our employee categories.
It was interesting, the ACT meeting last Thursday and Friday. On Friday, there was a conversation about tenure. And so it just reminded me that we had had that brief conversation. Wanted to share it with the rest of the group. Any other questions for Kim?
Just kind of a question, maybe for Ken, maybe for Dr. Lees. So we're doing a lot of things, right? Some of which, some folks could perceive as just another thing on top of an already busy, hectic schedule, right? And I think from where I sit, it would be a mistake to assume that more activity means more fruitfulness or a lasting change. So from where you sit, Dr. Lees, how are you going to know if it's different or it's making an impact?
With the initiative with the Thursday Thoughts, what I've been getting is feedback from faculty and staff expressing satisfaction or the value that they see in that communication and encouraging me to do more of that. And that has led to conversations with individuals that I think has helped promote relationships that maybe were somewhat truncated or not quite as close. And so I've seen it as a real positive. And obviously we will be following up with surveys of employee satisfaction, and we'll be asking about their perceptions of satisfaction with some of the changes we've been making.
Yeah, I think typically from a human resource perspective, we look at things like number of grievances, absenteeism, turnover, those types of things. So we want to see each of those areas kind of fall away, that there would be less of that, but definitely regular and intentional surveys are going to give us probably the best, I would say, comment information, that you can actually use in addition to the numerical scores.
Thank you.
This is an endeavor that takes some time, I would imagine, to see, significant tracking or change.
Typically, yeah, anytime you try to do an intervention, and so again, folks who are more well-versed in research would tell you that when you do an intervention, you need a period of time for people to recognize that it's now part of the way that we do things and not just something that we're doing right now. And so I would say that, you really want to do your surveys probably once a year or every couple of years in order to give the people time to notice that there's a positive change. Where's my Valerie? She knows. Anything else?
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Executive Director of the BBC Foundation, Leanne Burke.
Well, so on the Building Smarts workforce, we are at 78.26%. We are at $2,934,662. So we're getting there. We've made 130 asks. We have 67 businesses or people pledged. We are waiting to hear back on some of the grants still, and then we're going to be rewriting them that we received notes from, tweaking them a little bit, and then we're writing new ones. And we're still waiting to hear back, I think, from just one. We just got one back this week or last week from Senate, so we'll rewrite that one next year. And we'll rewrite Simplot. Do you guys have any questions on that? We're continuing to go out. So, when I think Bryce was mentioning about the principals and counselors coming on board, Jennifer has been attending those meetings as well, so we'll be putting together a packet for scholarship information for all the counselors. Typically, we go out to every single one of the high schools, but actually sitting down with them and getting an audience. So we're hoping that we'll have a bigger impact when they come on campus. So Jennifer's been working with them on that. And then the next thing that I need your help with. So this is my ask to you. We have our family campaign, which we just started. I think Melinda sent you out a letter last week. And then you guys are on my board, so you got the whole board. So our family campaign this year is Harvesting Good. And so we have 3 different categories. And so we have the most number of employees that participate per group. So they're broken down into all of these groups. They're about 13, and the word is the most 8 to 13. And so the highest number of participants per group, the highest dollar amount per group, and the highest number of new employees or that participate. So there's 3 categories, and so we are asking 3 different groups. Cabinet has already said yes, and the foundation board members have said yes, that they would put together a gift basket for the winning group in each one of those categories. And so I'm asking that you guys would put together a gift basket for a group of up to 13. And then there's going to be a competition, of course. We like competitions in the foundation for who puts together the best one. And so this will be all at the holiday potluck. And so everybody will get to vote on which one of the baskets is the best. So they'll be kind of blinded with who's putting together what. Aren't you guys excited? You don't look excited at all. I'm not kidding, guys. Really.
I'm game for it. I'm just horrible in the gift basket side of it. So
Yeah.
we'll need the designer
Yeah.
somewhere.
I support this, but not necessarily the creative endeavor. We can delegate.
I'm just flat admitting I don't have the skill to create it.
Anyway, I think it's going to be fun, and I think it's another way, since it's Harvesting Good, I really believe that everything we've talked about on improving morale and everything around here, having a leadership group provide gifts for, I think is a good thing.
Okay.
So I think it'll be fun. Even though you guys don't look like it's going to be fun, it's going to be fun. And I hope you all come to the potluck so we can see.
Is there a dollar value on them or just whatever?
So it's a contest, right? So you make sure you put all the best stuff you can put in the basket if you want to win the contest.
Right, and I'm not going to share with you what Cabinet's doing or what you do with Cabinet if I hear, and vice versa, or the foundation board. So.
I'll work on developing an inside information trap.
All right.
Belinda,
So-
we'll talk later.
So, yeah, it's up to your imagination. I was thinking about giving some ideas, but then I think that might actually limit your creativity.
There's the due date, Amy.
The potluck is December 13th.
It is Friday the 13th.
Yep.
Oh,
Okay, so I did have that right.
Nice.
So Friday the 13th.
Good.
Well, there's the theme right there.
Yeah.
Hey, it could be, right? So, that's what I need a basket.
Trustees, Jason.
And it doesn't have to be a basket, it could be whatever. I'm using that as a.
Okay.
Do you guys have any other questions for me? Since now you aren't excited.
Now that you've rattled all of them.
Come on, if I raise $2.9 million, you guys can put together a basket.
Basically. Okay, exceptional faculty award recommendation, Dr. Humphrey.
So in your packets, we have exceptional faculty award recommendations for 2 awards, one to Zach Olson for $1,771 to attend the conference on college composition and communication, as well as a jointly held conference of the 2-year college association in March 25th through 28th in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, as well as a request by Dr. Steve Coase for $2,000 to pay a portion of tuition for courses in education communications he was presently taking at Eastern Washington University. So the recommendation to the board is that you fund the two recommended boards.
Is there a motion to fund these requests?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Kim Garza, Board Policy 3011.
Yeah, so at your last meeting, we had a discussion about the salary and benefits for the president's position. And Jason had prepared changes to Board Policy 3011, I think, regarding the benefits for the president. So that is your draft one. And then based on the conversation that we had at the meeting, we talked about many colleges are not giving additional leave. They're doing some additional benefits. I provided kind of a version 2, which strips out the additional vacation and references the AP where the actual vacation schedule lies. And then left in the personal leave that if you felt like you wanted to do that, you could still provide some additional personal leave to the president. So there's not a whole lot of change between the two. It just, the second one would maybe reflect kind of what we discussed about looking at other benefits to provide outside of just additional vacation.
And the basis in that discussion was that both Terry Lees and Bill Donati were not able to use that
Yes.
additional gift of leave
Yes.
to begin with.
Yes, and there is a cap on the amount of leave that the college cashes out. So there is a chunk of it that just gets extinguished. That's the word we use.
So I believe this item is up for action today because this all ties to the launch of the presidential search process. So I'm looking for a motion to adopt either option A or option B.
I have a question
Sure.
first. The bereavement leave, is that rolled into this?
No, bereavement leave is separate. And so the president has always received 3 days, just like every other employee. So
Okay, because it looks like it's lying out on that, so that's why I was asking. So is it a separate?
it's covered in the AP. It's a separate piece in the AP. And sick leave is as well.
Okay.
Version 2 would follow the discussion we had about removing those extra leave days because they haven't actually been of benefit for presidents.
So I move to approve version 2 of board policy 3011.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Salah, did you have something additional you'd love to add?
With regard to the faculty report,
Yes.
Donnie was able to cover it pretty well for me. The only thing I can think of, did she mention anything about the World Diabetes Day?
Yes.
Okay. Ah, that was the big one. So yeah, did she mention, I'm guessing she also mentioned Lindsay Gross's trips to elementary schools.
Yes.
And yeah, sounds like she got everything.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm always, or now you can see why I'm always happy to have Donnie in my corner. She's just awesome.
Well, I didn't want to skip you since you were sitting
I-
there so patiently.
Makes perfect sense, but yeah, no, Donnie's awesome as usual.
Does anyone have a need for a 5-minute break? If not, I'd like to keep moving forward since Anna needs to bolt at 3:44 this afternoon. Our annual challenging task is the Transforming Lives nomination, to select from the nominees that we've been given to make a recommendation to send one of them up to the state level for consideration of recognition at the state's Transforming Lives Award banquet. So we have 6 nominees this year. Have you all had a chance to review the nominations and perhaps pick your top candidate? I'll just go around the room like we have in the past. John?
Sure. I first of all want to compliment especially the nursing community. It seems like the majority of the nominations were from them, and then Jen or Anita Dillion, who wrote a lot of the recommendations. I'm really torn. I guess I would say my first choice would be either Shalon Goff or Juan Martinez. And the reason is that the one is Ms. Goff is a 30-year-old returnee who worked at a career and decided to come back to school, and she was noted for her sense of humor that they still use in class, and I just think that's a nice message. The other young man from Warden High School, it was stated by, I think, Mr. Ham, that one of the brightest students he's ever had in 20 years. I know that was pretty amazing. But I do like, it's a tough decision. I know that one of the very first one, Laura Rodriguez, received a Dell Scholarship and a Costco Diversity Scholarship, which she must have more than she wrote out. So I was very impressed with that. Okay, so any of those three would be my recommendation.
Juanita?
I think my first choice was Juan also. And second choice would have, or just not in any really order, they were the top three, Aylin and then Jennifer Dominguez.
Thomas?
My first choice was, I'm gonna butcher the name, Shalon
Yeah.
Goff.
If I may, I know she pronounces it Shalon.
Shalon.
Mhm.
How does she pronounce the last name?
I believe, it's been a while since I've asked, but I believe it is indeed Goff.
Got it.
Yeah.
So, just for me, part of the reason why she rose to the top, just some of the advice at the end, I think, was pretty telling advice that applies to this campus in general right now. Pretty powerful stories she's had. Yeah.
Okay. No one else? Didn't have a second?
Well, I have a second, but it's a four-way tie for second.
Okay, gotcha. All right.
Yeah.
Anna?
My top two choices would have been Abraham and Juan. I think, consistently we see that demographic struggle at our campus. The Hispanic males, these two are pretty exemplary students. I think especially with Abraham returning to the community and basically using the skills that he's learned at Big Bend to further benefit the community. I think that's really kind of the heart of transforming lives, because he's not only transformed his own life, but he's continuing to do that for other students.
So my top choice was Shalon, and my second choice was Jennifer. So of the five of us, it's clear as mud, which is typical for this decision process. I think three of us had Shalon, so John, Thomas, and myself. Juan is in here 1, 2, 3 times as well. So those are the two that have the most selections. What's your pleasure? Anyone?
I'll break the awkward silence and I'll be a holdout for Shalon.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. One of the things that I look at is how, not only the same thing that Anna said, which was how they've changed their own lives, but how they're going to take that back, and especially taking it back to our local communities or those communities that don't have a lot of resources for their skill set. So, I mean, I was there with Juan as well, so
So which one?
Did you just pick one?
Mhm.
I don't, I can't. I can't. It's really hard to do that. I'm gonna stick with one, which was my first choice.
Okay,
July.
I'm liking this job more and more. So Shalon, Juan, and so. So I would need a motion
Are we gonna have,
and an
Juan
alternate.
as an alternate?
Yep. You bet. Absolutely.
I move that we accept Shaman as our number one choice and Juan Martinez, however you say it.
If I may, Ottawa.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As our second.
So we have a motion and a second.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Just this, would you please make sure that it says somewhere in the minutes that this is far more challenging than anything else we do? After that, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Next up is the presidential search items for action. The first item out of the gate, which is really the key to us having the ability to launch the recruitment phase tomorrow, is approval of the job description. We did receive two requested additions from the campus community. So you've been given an updated version, and on page 2 in red ink, we have the two additions that were not in the draft that were sent to you for review.
Right now.
Oh, you got a new one?
Yes, I'm handing out a new one.
Never mind.
Reread your file.
Fine.
Feedback flies constantly
Yeah,
here.
you're efficient. Thank you. Okay.
So this document that you have includes all the feedback that we've received thus far. And so the intent in the purpose is to help maybe somebody better understand our model of policy governance. I think that makes that sentence a little clearer, and then trying to make sure that we're clear about the types of communication and how the president is working with the trustees.
I want to thank you, Kim, for putting all the hours in to get us into the draft, and to John as well for joining us in the discussions to get to the draft, and also to the fact that others responded and did provide feedback to us. So it would be my desire to see a motion to accept, unless there are additional changes, deletions, or corrections you'd like to request.
I would make a motion that we accept the position profile as presented.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Woohoo.
For your information, we did something this time that we did not do in 2012. So in your packet, you have the full roster of the Presidential Search Advisory Committee members and identified and who they represent. In communicating with some of the other schools that have been doing presidential searches in the last 2 years or less, they have taken the tact of identifying a presidential search committee. So we made a decision between the three of us to do that as well this time in this process. So that is there for your information. You also have an updated timeline. And then, Matt, are you set up to display the website recruitment piece?
If you want to look at it on your
personal computers, it's just bigben.edu/presidential-search. The only link needed to be there, but link to the job description.
Could you scroll up a smidge? So there's this long list of items that we've added to the links for applicants to provide them access to both campus information that might be important to their decision to submit their package, their application, and then also additional things for them to learn about the communities and the K-12 school districts inside of our service district. If you can go up a little bit more, you'll also see the 2018-2019 academic year data graphic represented there to give them some quick facts about Big Bend on First View. This too is scheduled to go out tomorrow at the same time as the launch of the recruitment process. So if you have any comments or suggestions, we'd love to have them now, or as quickly as possible. And again, thank you to John and Kim for helping to provide feedback to this, and for Matt getting this built and ready to go in a really timely manner.
The only thing I was gonna ask, one other suggestion, if you want to do it or not, the communications that you send out, those updates, I thought that might be something that we could add to this as well, so the updates that are coming through.
The campus community updates, I'm good with that. As long as I stay on task and keep putting them up.
You will.
Any other suggestions for Matt? Okay, hearing none. It looks to me then, ladies and gentlemen, we have a recruitment phase that commences tomorrow. And the recruiting period is going to run.
So we're gonna run it through 5 p.m. on Sunday, the 8th. That's our priority consideration period. And so all the applications that are in by that time will be reviewed, and complete applications will be sent to the committee. And well, 8th of December. Oh, so it's like, I think we're already past the 8th of this month, so.
I didn't know it was January.
No, 8th of December. So, and I think the save the date cards have, those have gone out, and we put that out. And our ads will all go live on Monday morning.
I have another item for you on the search committee, but before you do that, John, do you want to maybe share some of the feedback we've been getting from presidents who believe they have potential candidates?
Yeah, I was at the national convention, and this past week we were at the state convention, and a couple of presidents that came up and said, I've got the perfect candidate for you, and said it'll be out live, I thought Friday, but Monday. So I know that we will have some, according to them, some pretty outstanding candidates who are familiar with us. So we've not talked to the candidates, but we have talked to other presidents around the state, and they know our situation, they know what opportunity is, and they're very enthusiastic about it.
Seems to be.
Sound like we have some, we will have some.
Will the job description be up on the event tomorrow? Will that,
It will. It's already in. I just have to release it. So we could see that.
So back to the Presidential Search Advisory Committee to let you know how tight we are to the timeline. First meeting of the search committee is next Monday evening for training purposes. Our second meeting of the search committee will be on the 16th of December, and the goal there is that everyone will have reviewed all of the candidate packages by that time, and we'll cut the list that evening to 10, and then I will tackle Christmas time reference checking, and then we'll be back together, and this is the brave part, I think, of our scheduling. Monday, January 6th, the committee will meet again with the intent to trim the list of 5, so that we will be presenting the list of 5 to the Board of Trustees 3 days later on January 9th when we meet. Any questions? Okay,
I mentioned about candidates available. We also, Steve and I spent an hour, delightful hour with the new president, 2 years president of CDC, and we just had a delightful conversation about her process and why she came to Washington State out of Michigan.
yes.
Michigan. Anyway, big risk for her, but she said, number one, she wanted a school that had policy governance. And then she also talked about the board and how good they were and those kinds of things. So we are being looked at just as much as, they're looking at, we're looking at them, they're looking at us. And so it's a big deal.
So I think that that's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up. Rebecca also pointed out that she set Google alerts to the college and to every individual trustee, and she tracked any of your previous media presence, and she tracked you all the way through the interview phase. So just so that you know that we're being examined as closely as we are examining the candidates for this position. But she was very insightful. I thought there were some great tips that she provided.
I have to say this was at this national convention in San Francisco. The current president, I think it's at Everett. She's a black lady, and bald, and anyway, she talked about her experience and how she came to the community early and blended in with the community and blended in with the campus and asked questions and talked to the grocery store and everybody else. And she said if she didn't get a good feeling, she wouldn't have kept her name in the ring, if you will. And so they do their homework, and of course they should. And we will do our homework. But it's an exciting process because I think we've got some really good things going on.
Great. Item 10 is board study sessions, and in your packet you have the list that we came up with December 20th of 2018, and then also on August 8th. It's my opinion, because there's the potential for us to do a workshop study session in December, that we need to follow what we discussed last month and use that next study session for the purpose of board self-evaluation and making sure that we have an actual, a better process for doing the annual self-evaluation of the board. I support that. I'm looking for your feedback and whether or not you have availability in December to do a study session. And I want to tack on to that in the first couple of months of the coming year, you're going to have numerous special meetings because each of the candidates that we choose to have face-to-face interviews with are day-long processes, including a formal interview with the Board of Trustees. So we likely won't get any other of these addressed in January, February. So anyone have a December conflict?
Just depends on it.
Does anyone have a December date that's like really super good? December 25th, maybe? Or,
Nobody's working that day.
I think it's the point. Let me start the conversation. How about Thursday, December 12th?
Just the next day is the holiday luncheon. Do you want to combine it with that?
Time's the luncheon.
Can't do luncheon, can't do 13th.
Okay.
The 12th looks like a movable day for me.
Yeah, well,
Almost.
Can do, no, I can't do it.
No.
Okay.
Since we're talking about board self-evaluation, I think it's one of those ones where we have to have all 5. So what happens if we move it to Tuesday the 10th?
Possible.
Yeah, no, it's possible.
we have a meeting at 1. But if you do it
A morning? We'll do that. Melinda, would it work? o'clock start, Tuesday the 10th. I would need a motion for that. There's a motion and a second from Thomas. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
So how much time?
Said at 9 to noon or something?
9 to noon and no later than that.
And who made the motion?
I did.
And
And second,
Thomas,
and the topics board self-evaluation.
correct.
What items would you like to have prepared?
Let me get back to you on that. Part of that's going to be driven by whether or not we approve the board goals that are here.
Going back to what you were talking about earlier with the candidate interviews, are there any tentative calendar holds for targeted dates?
No, but we can work on that, or at least make an attempt. You have to remember that part of that is going to be travel availability of the candidates. And one of the things too, Kim, maybe you can make a note that we should talk about in our conversation with the president from CBC, their process was a day and a half.
I have it.
Our process was a day, and when we described it for her, she said that is awfully daunting for a candidate because our process included 2 open forums plus the face-to-face interview with the board and the campus tours and meeting with staff and faculty. So I think we maybe needing to consider that schedule. It would still be, the board's roles would still all be contained in one day. And the way we did it last time in 2012, it was to sit down face-to-face interviews and then dinner with the board of trustees and spouse if they so chose. But I appreciate that, Thomas. I'm in the same boat with you at that time of year. So
Yeah, I get it though.
we'll work on it.
There's other parties.
We'll try to
Best
do
we
it.
can.
I was concerned because we were tromping on the search committee going forward at a rapid rate, and some of the community representatives have really challenging schedules. Kim did tell me that she's already heard back from all the off-campus members, and they confirmed their availability for the 18th of November.
But I think that's where like blacking out those dates
Yeah.
earlier rather than later is helpful, just to be able to try to avoid those, even if it's in flux about when they actually will plan.
So I'm guessing we'll have a better feel for that perhaps in January, because until you know what's in your candidate pool, you're not gonna know where you're at in the process until you get through.
Yeah, and it is accurate that we could end up with a roster of 5 that come to the board of trustees to review, and you could choose to interview 2 or choose to interview 5 or any combination thereof. And so that drives how many special meetings we're going to need to have to conduct those interviews. And then if we follow the 2012 experience, we would then deliberate and identify our finalists, which is immediately followed up by trips to visit their current campus. So there will be a number of dates for us to track. Okay, Thomas, I'm going to ask you to pick this one up. You've put in all the time and effort on trustee orientation and onboarding, and I have to tell you that after going to the ACT meeting, I already believed this, but you proved to be a visionary on this topic because the entire state system is now talking about it. The need for improved new trustee orientation and onboarding. And so I believe we have a matrix that needs approval. Do you have any additional comments or?
So, Thomas, if you didn't read, I guess that we had taken out the specific book on our last meeting when you weren't here.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I would just add, I hope that when we do have a new trustee that we want to onboard, that this is a framework that we could add to and adjust. It wouldn't be a fixed, set in stone.
The living
But
document.
this selfishly was something that would help me, so I'm glad others can benefit from it too.
Absolutely. And this draft has been shared with the state system. So.
Yeah, I had a good
And
discussion
harvest
with one of the trustees. His first name name is Sergio
From Walla Walla.
Walla Walla. Yeah, had a good discussion with them about this because they're looking at something similar.
So I'd be looking for a motion.
I would move that we adopt this framework for new trustee onboarding as presented in the packet.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Thank you for all your work on that.
Yeah, thank you.
The next item is board goals for 2019-2020. I brought a draft of that along last month, and I believe John asked that we add a item around accreditation. You'll see item 7 in this draft is maintaining accreditation as a critical aspect of the community college operation. Without it, the college is unable to serve its students. The trustees will be actively engaged during preparation for the upcoming accreditation cycle to ensure Big Bend meets the new guidelines. Is the board prepared to adopt the proposed goals for the rest of this year?
So moved.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
So for me, I have some concerns with 7 goals for the board. So a couple pieces, I feel like that might be too many, just given we had 4 last year, and of those, we didn't hit all those. And now we're going to be adding some more, all of which are important. The other concern I have is how will we know when some of these things are done? So what is the measurable outcome associated with some of these
I
goals?
think that's the goal of the December meeting. That we need to come out of that December study session, having developed a way to determine have we or have we not. And part of it is the tracking of trustee activity, which when we approved last month, the board's self-evaluation for the past year, a lot of it was driven by the numerics in terms of our ends.
Mhm.
But I think that we need to go further in that. Item 1 out of the 7 is not a regular annual activity. I think we're well into that and moving through it. Item 7, obviously, with Dr. Humphreys leading the charge there into the next year at this point in terms of accreditation, we would be looking to monitor through President Lee's and Dr. Humphreys what's being done to prep and what is done during the cycle. Participate in professional development as a board. You have an action item coming up today on that. And legislative advocacy is a regular, everyday responsibility of the 2 board members who are your legislative designees. So it trims the list a little. I'm
Well,
open to any idea.
Yeah, and I mean, there's 7 items, but none of them, I mean, when you look at each of them, I don't think it's an issue of can we accomplish it. A lot of these are just routine agenda items. We just need to make sure that they're on our agenda.
But I think your point is well taken, that we, how do we monitor and how do we know that we made progress towards that? And I think that's a good topic for our
Yeah,
study
I
session.
absolutely think that when we got to retreat stage, we had not spent the year really intentionally tracking those 4 goals. We met the majority of those goals by all of the activities that end up occurring in the trustees calendar, but we can be much more intentional about that. And I think that's what we have to try to work towards in this thing.
So should we go forward and approve this without having the study session, or should we wait until
Table it, man.
after the study session so we can have defined outcomes? Your spot on that.
That's really up to you. I'd like to see us, get goals on the table before we're halfway through the academic year. How we measure them over the remainder of the academic year can be worked out in December. Question is whether you agree or disagree. Or have others. What's your pleasure? table, or is there a motion?
We have the motion. We still have a motion and a second.
Okay. All those in favor of adopting the 2019-2020 board goals?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 13 is professional development for trustees. You have a proposal in your packet prepared by Linda Seppa-Salisbury, who's been providing consulting services to the executive leadership team. And as you heard today from Kim Garza, has now been extended through June of next year to continue that work. This proposal comes from the concept that some professional development for the Board of Trustees that is in line or in parallel to the professional development of our executive leadership team to contribute to improving our work as trustees, as well as better understanding what our team is doing to get better. The brass tacks of it is this proposal is $1,100 to $1,300. I think we asked Linda before that funds are available for it. It comes down to whether or not this is something you want to undertake. I did ask Jason to look at the question of, is a trustee's individual Myers-Briggs data a public record? Jason, you want to maybe share some input?
Sure. So given the broad nature of the definition of public records, it probably is. There's probably also some exemptions that would exempt it from public disclosure if it was responsible for public records.
Probably, or would it be exempt from public disclosure?
I think it would. I think that there's some really good arguments under a couple of exemptions that you can make.
I guess in reviewing this proposal, the hour phone conference with each board member going over that feels a little bit like a meeting that could be an email. And I think just to be respectful of everyone's time, I question how necessary that is, especially if we're meeting as a group to discuss that.
Okay. The final note on the proposal is that you can eliminate those individual phone calls and reduce the cost by 5%. So I think that would put us at a maximum cost of $800. Is this something you want to consider more, or is there a motion?
Well, what's the timing of this as well?
We haven't worked on any of that timing because we're going to have to dodge it in with everything else. But
So tie into one of the goals that we adopted, right? So within that academic year. Yeah, I'm supportive of it. I think anything that we're doing in terms of campus climate and asking for the cabinet and the president to do, I think it behooves us to do some of that self-reflection and personal development work as well. And I think this is a good initial step towards that. So I'm supportive of this.
that motion.
I would make a motion that we enter into this process of professional development with Linda Seppa-Salisbury.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I guess I'd ask Dr. Leese, do you see this as a benefit to the board, having gone through this yourself?
Yes.
If I might.
Sure.
There could be a benefit if you held off on doing this professional development until a new president is selected. So you could have a full understanding of how you all would communicate and set goals with each other moving forward. That would also give you some time during the summer before classes started, depending on who was selected. This might be a board retreat opportunity. That way you're really creating a cohesive unit with your new president.
I think that's a really good suggestion.
Yeah, I think that's really wise.
Okay,
Nice job.
so we do have a motion and a second on the floor that we need to address. That would approve this.
There's no timeline,
Right.
motion, so.
Right, but you can also vote in opposition to this particular motion, and we could ask Linda Salisbury to modify her proposal to encompass a new president.
And have it timed in the retreat.
Yeah.
I think a motion could be fine.
Okay. Would you be willing to?
I would be willing to amend my motion to modify her.
I will,
Second the amended motion.
thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. The next item is assessment of trustee activity. John Lane?
It's a star night. It's a nice event. Got to know being the donors and the recipients of the scholarship. It's a very special night. I appreciate that. Did meet with Stephen and Kim about presidential search meeting, their search events or activities. Attended the ACT and the legislative meeting over in Seattle, and I just wanted to say that the sessions I thought were very, very timely and very, very well done. Again, the onboarding for trustees, I know they read your mind, Thomas, because they talked about a lot, but it is a big group and they are really charging ahead to work on that and get something out that will be very adaptable to each college, and I think it was good. Also, they had a session on tenure, and they had what was the other one? That was really good.
Climate, inclusion, and diversity.
Yeah, and a food pantry and stuff that they're doing at Cascadia, which was I found very interesting. There was some discussion about dorms across the state, and it's a big issue right now, especially with some of the expensive housing in the urban areas. Anyway, we are fortunate and challenged, I guess, with our. I also was at the birthday celebration.
I attended the ACT conference. I agree with John. I think that this conference had a lot of value to it. And attended Star Night as well.
I had a check-in conversation with our board chair based on the meeting that I missed last time. Missed you guys. Love to see you again. Star Night, attended that, and had a conversation with Dr. Sergio Hernandez that I mentioned with the Walla Walla Board of Trustees.
I went to the ACT
Okay.
conference.
Presidential search activities. There have been many meetings and campus updates, which I hope are beneficial to those who read them. Had a great opportunity to sign a stack of years of service certificates. Ended Star Night, board agenda prep, and then also the ACT conference. On the legislative side, the system is preparing to be very aggressive in its ask for funding with regard to the capital project list. They have in the last decade not had the full list funded since the economy had its downturn. The legislature has regularly drawn a line about midway or a little less than midway of the project list. The system feels it needs to, this time around, mid-biennium, ask for slightly over $300 million to fund the full list. And that $300 million is in addition to the ask for all of the maintenance and emergency repairs on which is an additional 300 to 400 million. So it's a pretty aggressive legislative ask, especially in the wake of the I-976 being passed, which will cut, or is predicted to cut, revenue to the state by about $4 billion. And the governor's already halted any work on planned transportation projects till the legislature addresses this challenge. So maybe an interesting legislative session as a result of November election. That's all I have on that. Under next regularly scheduled board meeting, your date is Thursday, January 9th, 2020. Not including the special session. Is there any conflicts with that date? Okay. Item 16, miscellaneous, President Lee.
Thank you. Just a few items here. A reminder that next Thursday at 5:30 here at the Masto Comedy Center is the local Transforming Lives Award dinner. And the statewide dinner will be February 17th in Olympia. The Viking Booster Club Hall of Fame and auction is February 28th at 5:30 here at the Master Conference Center. And you may have noticed, I think it was last week's Thursday Thoughts, I had an item in there that talked about basically what is a policy of delegation of duties by the president to the vice presidents. And this is in two parts. One is to give the vice presidents professional development opportunities in preparation for the transition in leadership. And then also to free up my time so that I can work with Leanne to really try to get some of that funding that we need to get before I leave for the Workforce Education Center. So you're going to see more and more opportunities as they arise for the vice presidents to be chairing committees like shared governance or cabinet, things of that nature. It's not because I have any less interest in these things. It's that really my time should be focused on trying to get the funding that we desperately need. Otherwise, Linda's going to come after me.
Do any trustees have any items, miscellaneous items they'd like to share?
I appreciate the time commitment that you and others continue to make with this presidential search process.
It's been an incredible learning process for me, right?
Yeah, I think you guys are doing it well. Even I, sitting on the board, I'm aware of what's happening, but the level of communication coming out, I think it's exemplary.
I do have one item that I would like to put on the agenda for the January Board of Trustees meeting, and that is to recommend trustee emeritus status for Paul Hurai. And the reason that this is happening now, I think, has to do with we've missed opportunities to do it in the past based on all of his years of service. And we received a recommendation that maybe we should get busy considering that. And I think that that's exactly correct. So.
Was Paul a trustee? On the foundation?
Yes. Both. 9 years as a trustee, I believe.
Yeah.
And how many years on the foundation board? Okay.
30 or 40 years.
Yeah, there's, it's well earned and deserved, but we wanted to let you know that we were planning to do that in January, because as is customary, we would like to ask Paul to attend the meeting, to be here at the time that the trustees act on that. Okay. All right. Is there any other business to come before the Board of Trustees? Hearing none, and just under the wire for 3:45 departure. Meeting adjourned.
Well done.